Hey everybody, this is Andy Hall. You are watching the Best Advice Ever show, the show where people come on and give the best advice they ever received. Today, our guest is Professor Phil Zuckerman. And I want to tell you about how awesome Professor Phil Zuckerman is. I'm going to read a bit from his bio, from his About page. Phil Zuckerman is a professor of sociology and secular studies at Pitzer College in Claremont, California. He is a regular affiliated professor at Claremont Graduate University and has been a guest professor for 2 years at the University of, I'm going to mispronounce this, Aarhus?
Close enough.
Hey, I like that. Denmark. You've written several books. Of course, the most recent one is What It Means to Be Moral, The Non-Religious, Living the Secular Life, Faith No More, Society Without God. Phil founded the first secular studies department in the nation. Secular studies is an interdisciplinary program focusing on manifestations of secular studies in societies, cultures, and past and present. Phil, you're just freaking awesome. That's what you are. You're like,
hey, I can't help it. What can I do?
Right. So let's talk about the best advice you ever got.
All right. I've gotten a lot of good advice over the years, but this one really stuck with me. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Goes like this. I have a wonderful uncle. His name is Carl, but we call him Carly because that's the diminutive in the Czech language. He's from the Czech Republic, and Uncle Carly was an activist in the 60s in Prague. He was at the University of Prague. Really amazing life. He was there when there was a Prague Spring, when it looked like there was going to be a kind of opening of democracy. And so when that happened, the Soviets stormed in with their tanks saying, no open democracy here. We're going to control. So the Czech Republic was invaded. Long story short, my Uncle Carly had to flee because he was a student activist, and his brother was arrested. His father was arrested. I don't know about the timeline there. Actually, his father was arrested early in the 50s because for various reasons. But anyway, he got out of there, and how he got out of there is a pretty amazing story. But he was able to get out, and he came to stay with us. I remember he came to Los Angeles where we were living, and it was sort of like, well, what are you going to do now? And he went and got a PhD in political science, but it was the 70s. He had a really hard time getting a job. So he was sort of in exile, trying to make a life in California. He spoke like 5 languages, brilliant guy, but wasn't, so he went and took some like business classes, like, well, what do I do with my life now? And he married my mom's best friend. That was awesome. So, we were very close. He used to take me to movies and concerts. But he was working in an industry that he didn't care about, like just some industry making widgets, basically. And he had to read the trade publications of he had to keep up on the latest, the latest tech. It was blind rivets for aerospace engineering or something. And he had to keep up on that because that was what he was being paid to do. But his favorite subscription was to something called Foreign Affairs, a journal that talks about international politics. And he subscribed to that. And whenever that would come in the mail, he would be so excited. Like, I don't know if it came once a month or twice a month, but, it would be like, oh, yes. And when that arrived, it was sort of like Foreign Affairs, leave me alone. I'm running up to my room. I'm going to shut the door, or I'm going to sit by the fire, or I'm going to get a coffee or a beer. I just can't wait to devour the latest issue of Foreign Affairs. Long story short, Soviet Union collapses, communism collapses, Václav Havel becomes the prime minister of the Czech Republic and calls his old schoolmate Karl Kovanda back and says, come on and be the deputy foreign minister. So my uncle, who was really floundering, not living a happy life, he actually was unemployed at that moment, I think, comes back and gets involved, ends up being on the United Nations Security Council. He becomes the Czech Republic, representative to the UN, all this stuff. So I go to visit him when he's working in the castle in Prague, and he's telling me this amazing story, this change in his life. And he said, the lesson I learned was, you want to pick a career or a job where you're excited when the magazine comes related to that job. In other words, whatever you love, whatever, like, people don't read magazines anymore, but you can imagine whatever the equivalent is. If there's a magazine you subscribe to, if it's Surfer Magazine, if it's about fashion, if it's about politics, if it's about philosophy, it's about religion, if it's about guns, if it's about hunting, whatever it is. I mean, I'm not a big gun guy, but that just came off the top of my head. Religion, guns, they seem to go hand in hand. Then you should pursue that as your career. In other words, it's a simple way of saying you pursue your passion, but I've told that to students that I've had, and it's really helped them focus. They'll say to me, like, what should I do? I'm about to graduate. I don't know what to do. And I tell them that story, and I say, you don't want to ever have a job, if you can avoid it, where you have to read about it rather than wanting to read about it. So that's what comes to mind.
That is a great metric in deciding what you should be doing for a job and for a career.
Yeah. So that's that. I've got others, but that's the one that came to mind.
Well, I want to unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
Has there been a particular instance where a student has come to you after hearing your advice and saying, wow, that really worked for me. That really helped me drill down and focus in what I was doing and what I'm doing?
I can't honestly say in the long haul, so I haven't had someone come, 15 years later and say, you changed my life. I've had them say that about other things. That in particular, no, but I've had them say it helped them in the immediate moment. It like, as they're about to graduate, they've said, wow, I really appreciate that. And so for example, they'll want to write a senior thesis. And and they'll have a topic they think they should write about, that it sounds good or sounds impressive, but what they really like is this. And and in a way, this happened to me when I was an undergraduate, or even when I started graduate school in sociology. I thought I would be interested in social movements and workers' movements and things like that, and I was. But I found whenever I went to the library, this is in the days when you had to go to the library, I would get stuck in the religion section. And I'd be reading all these books about religion, which most sociologists don't give a shit about religion. They care about race, class, gender, these kind of things, which I care about as well. That's why I got my degree in sociology. But I kept being drawn to the religion stuff. And I also remember when I was an undergrad, I was at a library and I saw a magazine called American Atheists. And I was like, there's a magazine for atheists? And I was just so riveted. So if I look back in my life, my interests ended up being religion, secularism, atheism, these things. So when I tell the students my Uncle Carly's story and about my own stuff, it does help them. And they suddenly say, you know what? I think I'm going to do a senior thesis on what I really am passionate about, not what I think. And so that ends up, I had one student, for example, who said to me, could I do she loved podcasts. And I said to her, why don't you do a podcast for your senior thesis? Or no, let me take that back. She came to me and said, could I do maybe a podcast for a senior thesis? And I said, fuck yes. Like, obviously you got to still write some stuff up and have a lit review as an appendix. Right. But I said, do it. She did this amazing podcast about the gay marriage debate in California. She ended up using that podcast as sort of a calling card after she got out of college. She ended up getting an internship at This American Life. Like, it mushroomed. And that's because she did what she was, passionate about, not just what was the traditional, I guess I have to do this kind of thesis. So I've got,
Now, I know you have kids. How does that inform your parenting with your children?
I try my best to encourage their passions and not say things like, well, you have to make money, or you have to, don't forget, I mean, look, my oldest daughter is a double major in creative writing and art.
Wow.
Not the most, in my circles, you tell that to parents and they're like, oh, my condolences. Like, my son's majoring in economics and computer science, or my daughter's majoring in, biology and fucking data science or something. So, and my next daughter is going to art college. So, and I say to myself, you got to pursue what you love. Shit will work out. I mean, and so with my own kids, I have always tried to encourage them to just do what they love. And I've tried never to say, well, you're going to want to, you have to make a certain amount of money, or you got to, And maybe they pick that up anyway because it's so much part of our culture, and But I'd say with my own kids, I've tried to say, do what you love.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you said you had a second piece of advice you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I've gotten some other good tips. The other one that I tell my students a lot is, quick story. I had a friend in college named Trish, and she majored in art history as an undergrad, graduated, and I love art history. And then after college, she got a job working at a women's health clinic. This was up in Oregon. And I was in grad school. She was working at the women's health clinic, and she found that she really was passionate about healthcare. But she had studied like art history. I mean, she didn't study, anything about, and she suddenly decided, now she's 22, 23, that she wants to become a doctor, perhaps an OBGYN. And so suddenly she's looking at what that means. She has no background in science or healthcare. So she's really starting from scratch. And one night, Trish and me and a few other people were sitting around at the High Street Cafe in Eugene, Oregon, having some beers. And someone said, so Trish, you're going to be a doctor? Like, what's going to happen? She's like, well, I have to take a year of post-baccalaureate classes in, bio, chem, blah, blah, blah. Then I have to take my MCATs, which, I got to study for that. Then I got to apply. Then I'll get into med school, and that's so many years. Then I have to do my extra training in, women's health. That's extras. Then I'll do my residency, and she's going on and on and on. And someone said, like, well, shit, you're based on that, you're not going to be a doctor till you're like 36 or 37. Now, when you're 22, that seems,
Yeah, it does.
And everybody's like, yeah. So Trish looked at them and said, well, I'm going to be 36 or 37 anyway, so I might as well be 36, 37 and a doctor doing what I love, or be like, not going to med school is not going to make those years pass. And It was like everybody's head just kind of was like, oh my fucking God, like, yeah, so it's going to take her 9, 10, 12 years. Well, you can spend those 9 or 10, 12 years pursuing a goal or not, but those years are going to pass either way. And I've shared that with students as well, and that has really helped them as well. Like, wait a minute, you can't think in terms of like, well, how long is that going to take? You have to think about, what do I want to do with my life? And if that takes time, it takes time, because that time's going to pass either way.
Right. It takes you out of the moment and helps you look at the long view of things.
I think so. And other good advice I've had is, I do think it's important to wear condoms. And I also think, if ever you're wondering whether or not to tell the truth, like it's like you're hedging, go with the truth. Just if you're ever in that moment of like, do I say it? Don't I say it? And you don't know, if you have time to mull it over, that's one thing. But if you're ever in the moment, go with the truth. And I find that makes life a lot smoother. You won't regret it. And then the other thing is, when you're facing a moral dilemma, ask yourself, what will result in lesser suffering? In other words, who suffers? How will this cause suffering or not? And that's the best way to determine a moral dilemma. That's like 5 things.
No, that's fantastic. I like the idea about the default setting is telling the truth.
I mean, I lie sometimes. We all lie. Like, every now and then, if someone asks me what I think of their art piece or their short story, or I'll try not, I'll do my best, and I would obviously lie to alleviate suffering or to save someone's life, but in day-to-day things, best just to tell the truth. You'll really regret it if you don't.
Carl Rogers, the humanist psychologist, he tried to do something called kind of like compassionate truth telling. In other words, trying to tell people the truth, but not doing it in a mean or snarky way, but really trying to reach out to the other person. I struggle with that because it's so easy and it's fast just to say, well, exactly what's on your mind.
Yeah.
Instead of packing it up like that.
Yeah. And everybody has a different style, and everybody has a different way, and everybody reacts to frankness differently. Some people appreciate frankness, some people don't. My wife is very frank, and I appreciate it. It doesn't always make me feel good in the moment, but at the end of the day, I am grateful because I always know where she's at.
Well, I think everyone should have someone within their clique, within their circle, at least one person who can tell them the truth
Mm-hmm.
and who will be straightforward about it. And
Absolutely.
it helps prevent our brains, which seem to be wired to go run around in these cul-de-sacs, to be more in touch with reality.
That's right. That's right.
Fantastic piece of advice, I have to tell you.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
So where can people find you online, Professor Zuckerman?
I do tweet, even though it kind of Twitter's like a weird thing. Like I kind of hate it, but I can't, help it. So I am on Twitter. That's it. I don't do Instagram. I have a Facebook page, but I'm barely on it. In all honesty, if you just Google Phil Zuckerman, you'll see all my books, and Amazon or Powell's or Abe Books or anywhere that you like to get books. And then I have some videos on YouTube actually.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I think about it, if you click Phil Zuckerman, you hit videos, you'll see a bunch of my talks and speeches, podcasts. If you click on my books, you'll see my books, and hopefully you might enjoy one.
Are you working on anything right now?
I am working on another book about secularization and how it's happening and why, and the reality of it, and why it's happening so rapidly and exploding like never before. So that's my latest. I mean, the morality book just came out. So, I also blog for Psychology Today. It's called The Secular Life. So I have a blog. Those tend to be more thoughtful essays. I don't, my tweets are just kind of like ranting, but on the Psychology Today, I tend to do maybe once a month, once every 2 months, I do kind of a more contemplative piece about a body of research I've just come across or some kind of aspect of secular life. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for coming on. Best advice ever.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.